On October 1st, 331 BCE, two of the ancient world's greatest military minds faced each other on a dusty plain near the village of Gaugamela in what is now northern Iraq. On one side stood Alexander the Great, the young Macedonian king who had already proven himself a tactical genius. On the other, Darius III, the King of Kings, ruler of the mighty Persian Empire that stretched from Egypt to India. This wasn't just another battle. This was the decisive confrontation that would determine the fate of the largest empire the world had ever seen. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and both commanders knew it. To understand why these two armies met at gaugamela, we need to step back 2 years. Alexander had already invaded Persian territory, crossing the Hellespont in 334 BCE with an army of approximately 40,000 men. His stated mission, to avenge the Persian invasions of Greece that had occurred over a century earlier. But Alexander wanted more than revenge. He wanted conquest. He wanted glory. He wanted to prove himself greater than any king who had come before him. His first major victory came at the Granicus River, where he defeated Persian satraps and opened the door to Asia Minor. Then came Issus in 333 BCE, where Alexander first faced Darius himself. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance won the day. Darius fled the battlefield, leaving behind his family, his treasury, and his reputation. After Issus, Alexander didn't pursue Darius immediately. Instead, he moved south, securing the Mediterranean coast, conquering Tyre after a legendary 7-month siege, and marching into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator and declared a living god. He founded Alexandria, one of many cities he would name after himself. Meanwhile, Darius retreated deep into his empire, gathering his forces, preparing for the rematch. He chose the battlefield carefully this time. Near Gaugamela, he found a vast plain, perfect for his massive army. He even had his engineers level the ground to ensure his scythed chariots, a terrifying Persian weapon, would have maximum effectiveness. Let's talk numbers. Ancient sources vary wildly, but modern historians estimate Alexander commanded somewhere between 40,000 and 47,000 troops. His army was a well-oiled machine, battle-hardened from years of campaigning. The core consisted of the Macedonian phalanx, infantry armed with the sarissa, a pike up to 20 feet long that created an impenetrable wall of spear points. Then there was Alexander's elite cavalry, the companion cavalry, the best-trained horsemen in the ancient world. Alexander personally led these troops, always positioning himself at the critical point of battle. His army also included Thessalian cavalry, light infantry, archers, and allied Greek forces. Darius's army was something else entirely. Ancient historians claimed he had over 1 million men, which is certainly an exaggeration. Modern estimates place his forces somewhere between 100,000 and 250,000 soldiers. Even at the conservative estimate, Darius outnumbered Alexander by at least 2 to 1, possibly much more. The Persian army was diverse, drawn from across the empire. There were Persian cavalry, including the famous immortals. There were Bactrian horsemen, Indian troops with war elephants, Greek mercenaries fighting for pay, and contingents from dozens of subject nations. Darius also deployed 200 scythed chariots, with blades extending from their wheels, designed to slice through infantry formations and create chaos. On paper, Darius held every advantage. More men, more cavalry, a chosen battlefield, and time to prepare. But battles aren't won on paper. On the morning of October 1st, Alexander's army approached the Persian position. His scouts reported the massive enemy force waiting on the plain. Some of Alexander's generals urged him to attack at night to negate the Persian numerical advantage. Alexander famously refused, saying, "I will not steal victory." As dawn broke, both armies formed their battle lines. Darius positioned himself in the center in a massive chariot, surrounded by his best troops. His line stretched so wide that it overlapped Alexander's army on both flanks. The plan was simple: use the superior numbers to envelop and crush the Macedonians. Alexander did something unexpected. Instead of advancing straight ahead, he began moving his army diagonally to the right, toward rougher ground that Darius hadn't leveled. This movement stretched the Persian line and threatened to take the Macedonians off the prepared battlefield. Darius had to react. He ordered his left flank to shift and extend, trying to prevent Alexander from gaining the advantage of the rough terrain. This movement created exactly what Alexander wanted, gaps in the Persian line, but Darius struck first. He unleashed his scythe chariots, 200 war machines thundering toward the Macedonian line. This should have been devastating. But Alexander had prepared for this. His light infantry, javelin throwers, and archers moved forward in loose formation. They weren't trying to stop the chariots. They were creating channels for them to pass through harmlessly. As the chariots charged through these corridors, Macedonian soldiers targeted the horses and drivers. Some chariots did reach the phalanx, but the disciplined troops simply opened ranks and let them pass, then closed ranks again. The chariot attack failed. Now it was Alexander's turn. Alexander had been watching the battle like a hawk, waiting for his moment. When he saw gaps opening in the Persian left center, caused by their shifting to counter his diagonal movement, he made his move. With a battle cry, Alexander led his companion cavalry in a wedge formation directly at this weak point. This was Alexander's signature move, the hammer blow that had won him battle after battle. He always led from the front, always aimed for the enemy commander, always struck at the critical moment. The companions smashed into the Persian line, driving deep into their formation. Alexander was heading straight for Darius himself, just as he had at Issus. But while Alexander charged, the Persian right flank cavalry, under the command of Musaeus, attacked the Macedonian left, commanded by Parmenion. This was the moment of maximum crisis. If Parmenion's line broke, Alexander would be surrounded and destroyed. No matter how successful his own charge, the fighting was brutal. Persian cavalry actually broke through the Macedonian line and reached Alexander's camp in the rear, but the camp guards held firm. Meanwhile, Parmenion sent an urgent message to Alexander. He needed help. In the center, Alexander drove deeper into the Persian formation. His cavalry was cutting through the enemy like a sword through flesh. And then, just like at Issus, Darius saw Alexander coming directly for him. The young Macedonian king, covered in dust and blood, personally killing enemy soldiers, unstoppable, terrifying. Darius panicked. For the second time in 3 years, the King of Kings turned his chariot and fled the battlefield. This was the turning point. When the Persian troops saw their king fleeing, morale collapsed. Alexander wanted to pursue Darius immediately and finish what he'd started. But Parmenion's desperate message reached him. Reluctantly, Alexander broke off his charge and turned to support his left flank. By the time he arrived, the crisis had passed. The Persian cavalry, seeing their king flee, began to withdraw. The battle was over. Darius escaped with a portion of his army, but the Persian Empire had received a mortal wound. Historians estimate Persian casualties at 40,000 to 90,000 men. While Alexander's losses were relatively light, perhaps 1,000 to 5,000 troops. Though ancient sources vary dramatically, Alexander pursued Darius but never caught him. The Persian king was eventually murdered by his own satraps in 330 BCE. With Darius dead and no legitimate heir to challenge him, Alexander declared himself the new king of Asia. The Battle of Gaugamela was the end of the Persian Empire and the birth of a new world order. Alexander would go on to conquer territory all the way to India before his death at age 32. The Hellenistic period that followed would spread Greek culture across the known world, influencing art, science, and philosophy for centuries. One battle, one day, one moment of decision changed the course of human history. That's the power and the tragedy of war, exemplified forever on the plain of Gaugamela.